This week we're focusing on the Greek philosopher Socrates. He is perhaps the most commonly known of the Western philosophers and the kind of individual who you'd expect to learn about in an Introduction to Philosophy course. Our first reading covers the character of Socrates and the main principles behind his kinds of behavior. On this topic, we will introduce two terms you need to be familiar with and will emphasize a point made in the Great Conversation textbook. This, along with the reading you've done on the Greek antiquity, metaphysical systems, and structura, are crucial items to understand when considering Socratic dialogues, four of which are found in the second reading for this week. The first term is arete, which our text defines as excellence, and specifically excellence in doing what one is supposed to do. But how do we know what a thing is supposed to do? This is where the idea of teleology comes into play. Teleology, from the Greek root telos, is the concept of purpose, design, or direction of progress. It's something like the notion of potential unique to a particular class of beings. If they act in a way that fulfills that potential, then they become more and more like themselves, an ideal version of themselves. But if they don't fulfill that potential, then they become less and less like their ideal self, essentially moving downwards until they become a lower class of beings. Let's see how that works. Most commonly, the way we understand the purpose of a thing, whether an object or a living being, is by looking at the features that are unique to them. Of course, this is applied to classes of things and not so much individuals. So, cats have sharp teeth, good hearing, a good sense of smell, excellent balance, amazing night vision, and claws. But the teeth, hearing, and smell are features that they share with a lot of other animals. Because these are shared features, they're not particularly interesting in figuring out what cats are designed to do. But when you look at the claws, balance, and night vision, those are fairly unique in the mammal realm. That's where the design features are focused. Balance means the ability to move stealthily across narrow and tight spaces. Night vision means that they can do so in near complete darkness, and the claws allow them to climb, fight, and hunt. So these are the three unique features that make the design of a cat into that of a nocturnal stealth predator with excellent climbing and traversing rough terrain abilities. Those are the features that tell us about the purpose of a cat. But what about humans? Well, we have a whole host of features that are fairly common in the animal world, and especially in the category of mammals. We have spines, we have eyes, we have feet, hair, sexual reproduction, and all this is shared by a lot of other animals, so that's not the interesting feature of human design. What do we have that's unique? We have reason and intellect. That is, we have a function that allows us to keep our instincts and emotions in check, to reflect on the past, to imagine a future that does not exist. When we imagine that future, we can also determine an effective way of turning our present reality into that imagined future through a series of incremental steps. What else do we have that's unique? We're not only social creatures, plenty of other animals are too, but we can't actually prosper in any meaningful way without social bonds. For one thing, we have a very long pregnancy period where the woman and the child are extremely vulnerable and need social protection from all sorts of things going wrong. And then we have an additional very long development period during which we have to be taught not to set ourselves on fire. During that period, we require insane time investment to create a functional human being. And it takes an upwards of a decade for a human to become sexually functional, so that our birth rate is kept low, and each child is a pretty heavy investment. Giraffes, for example, can run in under an hour after birth. Elephants can walk, but we are useless for a decade. That's unique, and it requires a unique kind of social structure of interdependency to allow us to function well. So humans are rational, intellectual creatures which require a particular kind of social structure to enable them to survive and thrive. All this matters quite a bit when reading pre-Darwinian philosophy. More on this in the next module. This is the idea that underlies all Western and much of Eastern thought. We knew what the purpose of humans was. That means that we knew what it takes to make humans more or less human. A human that fulfills their rational and social potential is more human than the one who fails at it. That's why we say that a person behaving like an animal is a pejorative statement. Yes, we are animals, and every ancient civilization knew that, but we are also above animals in an important way because we have features that the rest of them don't. But if we abandon the pursuit of what makes us human, then we degrade ourselves. And you can think of it this way. We don't think dogs are in any way morally bad if they just hump everything in sight. But imagine a person doing the same thing. Suddenly we think there's something wrong with them because their reason and intellect is not being used. On top of this general telos, that is direction and purpose for existence, we also have job-specific excellence, like what it means to be an excellent doctor or an excellent janitor. But all these specific kinds of functions must reflect excellence in the general function as well. That's not to say that in order to be an excellent doctor, you need to be an excellent human being in some sort of a moral way. But what is required for an excellent doctor is the kind of investment in both development of intellectual faculties and social participation that we would otherwise consider a hallmark of human teleology. Now that we have these terms sorted out, let's turn to the reading on Socrates and a few important points. First, Socrates was wildly different from the Sophists. Sophists were a class of people who were good public speakers and who taught the art of debate to those who could pay. This was a big deal at the time because good public speakers could convince the crowd to vote for them or support their ideas, and that meant a victory in very tangible terms. You could be appointed to a post, or you could command the people. But the issue with Sophists is that their approach was focused on winning a debate, which is done by winning people over. As you have no doubt noticed, just because somebody is persuasive has nothing to do with whether or not they're right. And this was the key to the Sophists. Socrates was different from them because he seems to have believed that winning an argument is useless. The entire point of communication, of debate or argument, was to clarify and refine our ideas so that they come closer to the truth. The way we did that was by questioning the ideas we had and seeing if they had unintended loopholes, and then finding a way to say everything that we wanted to communicate without either contradicting ourselves or including the kinds of things we did not intend to include. This was a use of reason to shape our own thoughts and those of the society. This meets the requirements for being human, while the sophist approach of winning debates does not. So Socrates had a couple of assumptions in play here. 1. There is only one truth. 2. The truth can be known. 3. Reason can get us to the truth. And 4. Truth must be coherent. That means that it must make sense rationally, especially when put together with other ideas that we have. When we combine these assumptions, we get a good sense of how Socrates operates. He does not try to assert the truth because he claims that he does not know it. But what he does is to discover what paths to the truth are false and get rid of them. So in a way, he's not finding the truth, he's finding out what's false as a way of clearing the ground so that the path to the truth may become easier. As a decent analogy, when you claim you know the truth and then try to lead people to it, you're doing something like solving a maze puzzle backwards. It's easy, but the Socratic approach is not there to tell you the truth. He lets you wander the maze and simply notes when you have hit a dead end. You then have to go back to the last place you made a turn and make a different choice and keep on going until hopefully you come out the other side. Now finally, let's revisit a reason why Socrates does all this. The Greeks had believed in the Homeric gods since about 1200 BC or even earlier. Believing in those gods also meant that the values they provided were used to build up the metaphysical foundations of Greek society, and specifically Athens. Ideas like justice, honor, piety, and courage all played a crucial role for how individuals and the society was supposed to function. It set up the ethical limits of the society and gave the whole thing a direction of progress. But the Greeks had stopped really believing in the gods. All they had left was some social inertia, and that was fast running out. That means that the metaphysical and ethical structure of society was coming apart, which inevitably gives us total social collapse. The problem was that no one seemed to notice, aside from some earlier philosophers. They, however, tried to force their own metaphysical ideas on the people, and that failed. If new metaphysical pillars were not found soon, the collapse would quickly follow. And one way to understand Socrates, and a pretty useful one I believe, is to imagine him as someone who understood that society was about to collapse. He also understood that you could not force ideas on the people. They had to figure them out on their own, or they would not accept them. So the Socratic approach is to talk to people, and preferably influential experts on the issues, and instead of arguing, he would simply demonstrate the failure of their ideas by asking them questions. This way, the people would come to the realization on their own that they don't actually believe in the ideas they say they believe in. They would see the flaws in their own logic, and then they could start fixing these ideas and do so in a way that would preserve the society. On top of that, once the top authorities on the subject, the kind of people everyone believes, came to accept new conclusions, the people would follow their lead and actually adopt the new ideas. It was less important who made the new suggestion, and it was more important that it was coherent and would be adopted by the community. If the conversation could be focused on some particular crucial concept, the state might seriously be safe from collapse. This metaphysically driven way of understanding Socrates is not the traditional one, but the idea that he risked upsetting his society and even death for the sake of a pet project seems less than satisfactory to me. And this is doubly true when we consider the love that Socrates had for Athens, and we see this in the next set of dialogues. This explanation doesn't really explain Socrates well, nor does it explain the pre-Socratic philosophers, not even the later dialogues written by Plato. But when we examine the context in which they operated, we see something like a meaningful problem that they were trying to solve, and one that would lead to the collapse of the Greek society if it were not addressed. In light of this examination, the idea that Socrates did it for the lulz is not so functional. Additionally, although Socrates does seem to reject the meaningful notion of Greek gods, he does believe in the soul, and thus the ability to live on in some way after the death of the body. The state of our afterlife, according to Socrates, or rather Plato, depends on our arete in life, our excellence as a human being. If we take this claim seriously, then the pursuit of truth, which is the ultimate aim of reason, is the thing that brings us closest to human excellence. On top of that, if we consider the social element of human telos, the idea of Socrates trying to re-establish the social foundations of Athens is about as worthy a goal as it is possible to have at that time. Not only is Socrates advancing his own excellence through the use of reason to find the truth, he is doing so in a way that is supposed to preserve and revitalize a society that makes such pursuit of truth possible. In the next video, we'll cover the 4 dialogues found in the Great Conversation, Chapter 5, the Euthyphro, Apology, Crito, and Phaedo.